There's a specific kind of anxiety that nobody talks about. Not the kind that hits you before a job interview. Not the kind before a first date. This one is quieter. More personal. It shows up the moment your phone buzzes and you read those 6 words. Hey, can I come over sometime? Something shifts in your chest immediately. You don't hate this person. You actually love them. But your stomach still drops just a little bit. You stare at the screen. You type, delete, type again. Finally, you send back something like, of course. Let me check my schedule. But your schedule is fine. It's always fine. That was never the real issue. And here's the part that will genuinely surprise you. That quiet dread you just felt? Science has a very specific explanation for it. And it has nothing to do with being antisocial, cold, or a bad friend. In fact, it might be one of the most intelligent things your brain does. Today, we're going to break down exactly why some people feel completely at ease meeting friends at a coffee shop, a bar, a park, anywhere, but the moment someone wants to step through their front door, the whole nervous system quietly goes into lockdown mode. We're going to talk about the real psychology behind it. Why your brain treats your home like a protected military base. Why guests physically drain you in a way that no other social situation does. And why this is not a flaw. It's actually a deeply wired survival pattern that your brain built to protect you. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to understand yourself in a way you never have before. Let's start with something most people completely overlook. For most people, home isn't just a roof and 4 walls. It functions more like a psychological decompression chamber. Think about your average Tuesday. You wake up, get dressed, walk out that door, and immediately your brain shifts into performance mode. You're managing how you come across to your co-workers. You're calibrating your tone in every conversation. You're laughing at things that aren't funny, nodding along to things you disagree with, and holding back the things you actually want to say. All day long. That's not laziness or fakeness. That's a very real cognitive process called self-monitoring, and it burns an enormous amount of mental energy. So by the time you turn that key and walk back through your front door, your brain isn't just glad to be home. It is desperate to be home. It's like a phone that's been running every single app all day and finally gets plugged back into the charger. Home is the only place on earth where you are completely off the clock from being a presentable human being. And that matters more than most people realize. So here's where it gets really interesting. When someone you care about, even your closest friend, steps through that door, something almost automatic happens inside you. Your brain doesn't register it as a friend arriving. It registers it as the safe zone being entered by an outside variable. Instantly, without any conscious decision from you, that decompression mode shuts off. The armor goes back on. The self-monitoring restarts. And the cruel part? You can't turn it off just because you want to. You can tell yourself 100 times, relax, it's just Sarah. You've known her for 10 years. Your rational brain hears you. Your nervous system does not care. This is why you can sit across from that same friend in a restaurant for 3 hours and feel completely fine. But 45 minutes of her sitting on your couch somehow feels like running a marathon in dress shoes. The restaurant is neutral ground. Your home is your only place of psychological safety. And your brain is wired to protect it. There's another layer here that most people don't consciously recognize but feel every single time. When you're out, at a diner, at a park, at someone else's place, you hold a very specific kind of power. The power of the exit. At any point, if the conversation gets heavy, if your social battery starts flashing red, if you just need out, you can glance at your watch and say, oh wow, it's almost 9. I should really head out. Clean. Simple. No explanation required. You decided when it ends. That decision belongs to you. Now flip it. Guest is on your couch. It's been an hour and a half. The conversation has looped back around to the same topic for the 3rd time. You're exhausted. But you cannot stand up in your own living room and say, all right, time's up, please exit my home. So you sit there, smiling, nodding, dying quietly on the inside. Without an exit, your brain doesn't experience the hangout as a choice anymore. It experiences it as a situation you are trapped in. And the moment your brain registers a trap, it triggers low-level stress. Continuously. For the entire duration. That's not you being dramatic. That's your nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do. Now let's talk about something you've definitely done and probably found embarrassing afterward. Guest is coming over in 20 minutes. You were completely fine living with last night's mug on the coffee table and a pile of mail you've been ignoring for a week. But the moment you get that text, you turn into a completely different person. Suddenly you're shoving throw pillows into precise geometric arrangements. You're spraying air freshener into corners of the room no guest will ever go near. You find yourself wiping down the bathroom mirror like a crime scene investigator removing fingerprints. And then, your guest walks into your now immaculate, candle-scented apartment, and the very first thing out of your mouth is, sorry about the mess. There is no mess. There hasn't been a mess for 15 minutes. What's actually happening here is something psychologists call impression management, and for someone with a strong attachment to their personal space, it goes even deeper than that. Your home isn't just where you live. It is, in a very real psychological sense, an extension of your identity. When someone walks through that door, your brain doesn't think, they're visiting my apartment. It thinks, they're auditing me as a person. That slightly crooked picture frame isn't just a crooked picture frame. In your mind, it's evidence. Evidence that you're disorganized, overwhelmed, or not quite holding it all together. So the cleaning isn't really about the apartment. It's about building a version of yourself that feels safe enough to be seen. And sorry about the mess is just the preemptive move. Lower their expectations so they can't possibly be disappointed. Once the guest is actually there, a fascinating split happens inside your brain. Half of you is present. Laughing, listening, engaging, being a genuinely great host. The other half has quietly launched a background security operation. Your guest sets their drink down without a coaster. On the outside, you're mid-sentence telling a story. On the inside, your eyes have locked onto that glass like a heat-seeking missile. Every few seconds you're calculating the condensation risk. How long before it marks the surface? Should you casually slide a coaster over? Will that seem passive-aggressive? They ask to borrow a charger. Your brain immediately runs a rapid scan of every room they'll pass through to get to the outlet. They move a decorative item on your bookshelf 3 inches to the left. You notice. You will absolutely move it back the second they leave. You will think about it until you do. This isn't pettiness. This isn't obsession. In psychology, this is called environmental sensitivity, a heightened awareness of changes in your personal space. For people like you, your home holds an invisible order, an energy, a particular arrangement that feels correct. When someone disrupts it, even accidentally, even innocently, it registers as a disturbance in your internal sense of safety. You're not tracking their every move because you distrust them. You're tracking it because your nervous system is constantly running a background calculation. Is my safe space still intact? Okay. So the guest is leaving. They stand up, they stretch, they say the words. I should probably get going. Something happens in that moment. Something you've never said out loud to anyone. A quiet, almost electric wave of relief. The kind that starts somewhere in your shoulders and moves all the way down. You walk them to the door. You hug them. You mean it completely. You tell them to text you when they get home safe. You mean that too. The door closes. And then you just stop. You stand in your hallway in complete silence for a moment. Then you exhale. Not a normal exhale. The kind that sounds like your entire body has been holding its breath for 2 hours without telling you. You sink into the couch. You don't turn on the TV. You don't pick up your phone. You just need a minute of absolute nothing. There's actually a name for what you're experiencing in that moment. Researchers call it a social hangover. It mirrors a physical hangover in a surprisingly accurate way. The fatigue, the need for quiet, the slight headache, the desire to just lie still and let your body recalibrate. What's happening biologically is a stress hormone crash. For the entire duration of the visit, your brain was running at a significantly elevated level, reading the room, managing your reactions, protecting your space, keeping the conversation alive. The moment the perceived social pressure is removed, all of that adrenaline and cortisol has nowhere to go. So it just drops. You're not tired because your friend was exhausting. You're tired because of the invisible performance you were running the entire time, and the fact that you ran it so well that nobody ever even noticed. Here's the part nobody talks about. Because here's the contradiction that lives right at the center of all of this. You don't want to be like this. Not entirely. On a Saturday afternoon, lying on your couch in your perfectly quiet apartment, you scroll through your phone. You see a photo of a backyard dinner party. Long table, mismatched chairs, string lights, someone's dog weaving between people's legs. It looks warm and loud and alive. And something in you aches. Not jealousy, exactly. Something more complicated than that. A kind of longing for a version of yourself that finds that easy. That can say come over anytime and actually mean it without a single alarm going off in the background. You love your people. Genuinely. Deeply. You'd show up for them at 2 a.m. in a storm without hesitating. Distance is never the issue. The issue is proximity. Specifically, their proximity to your one sacred space. And explaining that to someone who doesn't experience it this way? Nearly impossible. Because I love you but your presence in my home exhausts me is not a sentence that lands gently. So instead you invent reasons. You rotate through a small set of believable excuses. The apartment's being repainted. I've had a brutal week. Maybe next time. Every excuse is a small kindness to them. And a small accumulation of guilt for you. That guilt is real. It deserves to be acknowledged. Not fixed. Not eliminated. Just understood. But here's where we need to change the lens you're looking at this through. Because if you've spent years treating this as a personal flaw, some broken wiring that separates you from the people who can just let people in effortlessly, it's time to reconsider. The fact that you know your limits this precisely is not a weakness. It is an unusually high level of self-awareness. You know exactly where your edge is. You know what you need to function at your best. And rather than ignoring that or pushing through it until you're resentful and depleted, you find ways to honor it. When you suggest coffee instead of a home visit, you're not being avoidant. You're making a decision that protects the quality of every interaction you have with that person. Because the version of you that meets them at a neutral place, relaxed and fully present, that version is a far better friend than the one quietly counting down the minutes on your own couch. Your boundaries are not walls built out of fear. They're gates built out of self-knowledge. And a gate is not the same thing as a door that's permanently closed. A gate opens. On your terms. When you're ready. For the people who matter. That is not selfishness. That is the most honest form of respect, for yourself and for the people you care about. Because you're choosing to give them the best version of you, not just the most convenient one. So if you're the kind of person who feels a wave of relief when plans get cancelled, if you've ever tiptoed through your own apartment because someone knocked and you just weren't ready, if I'll come to you is basically your default setting in every friendship, you are not broken. You are not cold. You are not difficult. You are someone who understands the difference between performing a relationship and actually showing up for one. Protect your space. Know your limits. And stop apologizing for the boundaries that keep you whole. Because the world doesn't need more people who say yes to everything and show up as nothing. It needs people like you, who give less often, but mean every single bit of it. If this video felt like it was written specifically for you, it kind of was. Hit subscribe, because every week we go this deep into the psychology of how real people actually think and feel. And if you know someone who sends you sorry, can't tonight more than they'd ever admit, share this with them. No explanation needed. The video will do the talking. There's more that explains you waiting right here. I'll see you in the next one.